Ladies and gentlemen, the Insight Times. Today is July 26, 2025. It is the Independence Day of Liberia. Well, so many people have heard about Liberia, but they just don't know what this country is. It is a small country in Africa, the west coast of Africa, with an interesting history. This country is about the size of the American state of Ohio and the European state of Portugal. Liberia is 43,000 square miles, situated on the west coast of Africa. This country has played important leadership role on the global scene from the very founding of it. For example, Liberia is the founding member of the League of Nations. So many people don't know. Many African countries were not independent by that time. Liberia is also the founding member of the United Nations. Do you know that in 1947 there was an important vote that established the Jewish state of Israel? There was a United Nations petition plan that was adopted at that time, and Liberia played a cardinal role by voting yes to the formation of the Jewish state of Israel in 1947. Liberia's vote in the UN at that time was so important that it helped secure the adoption of that plan that brought about a Jewish state. So, President William V. Stallman of Liberia visited Israel in 1962 and solidified a relationship that both states have enjoyed, share culture, share political and religious values for quite a long period of time. So, anytime you hear about the founding of Israel, the UN petition plan, thing about Liberia, our vote was cardinal to the adoption of that plan that came about with the formation and independence of the Jewish state of Israel. Have you ever heard about the Organization of African Unity that was established in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia? The idea actually was born in Sannikoli, Nema County, Liberia. President William V. Stallman had invited Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea to see how the countries of Africa can come together and solidify their own membership in a single bloc that will have political and economic influence on the continent. It was from that meeting that the idea of African unity came about, and it was actualized in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, with the Emperor Haile Selassie and all these guys I just mentioned. So this tiny country has had great influence in Africa. It has done tremendously well by suing the apartheid regime in South Africa when Nelson Mandela was in jail. But however, the founding of Liberia wasn't that rosy. I will tell you a little bit about that from this book that I've written, Empathy. There is a portion of this book dedicated to Liberia, the founding of Liberia. I won't bore you, I will just read a bit of that. When it comes to independence, people confuse Liberia's independence with that of Ethiopia. We are the oldest republic in Africa. That does not mean that Liberia is the oldest independent state. Ethiopia is the oldest independent state in Africa, probably the entire world. But they were not a republic. So we were a republic since 1847. And sometimes people say, no, it was Ghana. Ghana got its independence in 1957, and we got ours in 1847. Solid 11 decades before Nkrumah's Convention People Party dismissed a colonial regime from Ghana. Let me read a little bit of stuff that I wrote here about Liberia, the founding of it. I won't take a long time from the book Empathy that I wrote. Liberia was founded by American colonizationists who became popular after the transatlantic slave trade came to an end in 1807 due to British intervention and an act of Congress. However, the illegal slave trade continued for decades after the official abolition was declared in 1807. The first batch of ACS sponsored immigrants were 86 settlers who departed New York on February 6, 1820, on the Mayflower of Liberia, that was actually called the Elizabeth. When the settlers arrived in Liberia, They met the indigenous inhabitants who owned the land and lived in kingdoms and chieftaincies. An early contract at the point of gun, the Duca contract, forced the indigenous people to sell a portion of the land to the American settlers. Lieutenant Robert Stockton in 1821 persuaded African King Peter to sell Cape Menserado, that was by then called Menserado, by pointing a pistol at his head. The settlers quickly expanded their influence inland a few years later by aggressively negotiating and acquiring new territories from the indigenous kings, as Judy Ashman, who succeeded Stockton, did when in a treaty of May 1825, King Peter and other native kings agreed to sell land in return for 500 bars of tobacco, 3 barrels of rum, 5 casks of powder, 5 umbrellas, 10 iron posts, 10 iron posts, and 10 pairs of shoes, among other items. In 1846, due to financial constraints that arose after it failed to get the US Congress to commit itself to handling Liberia as a protectorate, the ACS asked the colony to declare independence. Another key factor that led to Liberia's early declaration of independence, making it Africa's first republic, was the tension of territorial integrity during the pre superpowers scramble for the African continent. The British had Sierra Leone on the west, the French had Guinea on the east, and the Ivory Coast in the north. Both European powers had significantly encroached and trespassed on the new colony. The British argued that Liberia, an American philanthropic experiment, didn't have sovereignty as a state and thus couldn't operate like a political entity in the international system. On July 26, 1847, the new colony declared independence from the American Colonization Society. Now, it is an interesting history that I just read to you. You will try to interpret it yourself, but it was a struggle. And when we declared our independence in 1847, it took a little while before the flag of Liberia was adopted. Before then, the Star Spangled Banner or the American flag hanged over Liberia to project its territorial integrity to the world. And remember, Robert F. Stockton, that I talked about earlier, he was assigned by the US government to Liberia and he used a battleship called the Alligator. By that time, the American Navy was pretty small in size, smaller than that of Argentina, actually. And they decided to send one of the battleships to Liberia to secure that land. So you should see the connection between the United States and Liberia. That's why some people even consider it to be like this whole country is a derivative of the American political system. But the earliest founding fathers of Liberia lived a frontier life while struggling to form a country in an epicenter of impossibilities. Listen, in its early stage, Liberia's founding fathers had many difficult issues to deal with, such as an unprecedented high mortality rate in a strange environment, the constant threat from slave raiding indigenous people. Overall, 4,571 settlers landed in Liberia between 1820 to 1843. By 1843, all but 1,819 had died. The survivors totaled 39.79% of the total immigrants who arrived, making it the highest mortality rate of any country since modern record keeping began. The disturbing news of such an unprecedented mortality rate spread rapidly in the United States and gave rise to fresh criticism of the Back to Africa or colonization movement. Concerning mass repatriation of blacks to Liberia, Republican Party candidate for U.S. Senate Abraham Lincoln demurred. It is now Lincoln speaking. My first impulse would be to free all the slaves and send them to Liberia. He then cautioned, if they were all landed there in a day, they will all perish in the next 10 days. During the first Lincoln and Douglas debate of the U.S. Senate in Ottawa, Illinois, on August 21st, 1858, the issues of emancipation and its aftermath in Liberia were paramount. Well, this is a brief history of Liberia, the struggle of the founding fathers to secure our independence, the essence of it, and importance of its contribution on the global scene. The Inside Times. Have a wonderful day.